Sticking with the Canadian men's national team, it was announced last night at what I feel was like 1 p.m. Eastern or 1 a.m. Eastern time, friendly
It
for the
was.
Canadian men's national team. They will be playing Japan in Niigata on the 13th of October. Obviously, the Japanese are a familiar opponent for Canada in the lead up to the World Cup, but just the one friendly being announced, and there was more from Jason DeVos about not being able to find another opponent. Doesn't look like they'll have anything in the September window. So on one hand, supporters are like, yes, friendly. On the other, how are we only getting one friendly? That was sort of the split that I heard, at least in my brief research at that hour in the morning. Gareth, what do you make of this entire story? Because there's a lot of meat on this bone.
First of all, Japan, top team to play against, good opponent, good time for the October window for Canada to be playing a team like that. So let's get that on the table, and we're looking forward to that game. The quote by Jason DeVos that you mentioned, Adam, given our inability to confirm an additional high-quality opponent in the September window that met our competitive needs as well as financial constraints, we were unable to secure fixtures for both windows. So when I read that statement, it's like, as well as financial constraints. Like it put the most important part in brackets there.
Yep.
I have a couple things to say about this. First of all, this September window is a stupid one, anyways. Like let's just acknowledge that the window opens up 3 weeks after the Premier League season opens, 2 weeks after most other European leagues. MLS is just back up, right? And all of a sudden, it's like an international window. So it's a stupid window because you're trying to log jam in these like World Cup qualified games in Europe, Euro qualifiers. So that's what the window is for. And because of those qualifiers, like there's a limited amount of options of teams that are actually available for friendlies. So it's difficult enough to find a good game at the right price. Let alone with all this fixture congestion, it makes it that much more difficult. Now, I can share what I know about this, and I know that for this September window, there was an offer on the table that teams wanted Canada to play them, and the first time in my recollection, we're willing to pay Canada a decent sum of money to play 2 games in that window. It wouldn't have covered the cost of their entire camp because things are expensive, players' fees, coaching staff, travel, all this stuff. Camps are very expensive to run now. So that came from the desk of the former regime within Canada Soccer and was passed on to the new desk of DeVos at that time. And DeVos, when he took over, was was in no position to just all of a sudden say, yes, we'll take those games without investigating further. And we all know, and we should know right now, is there was a massive push inside Canada Soccer, the previous regime and this one, to provide programmatic equality in terms of spend. And that is why Canada couldn't take these 2 games, even though they were going to get paid a decent number for them because of the programmatic spend. Because if you ran a men's camp, at that point, you would have had to have run an additional women's camp, which Canada Soccer didn't budget for and told them with programmatic spend equality, they get a camp, you get a camp. That would have added on an additional extensive sum of money to their coffers, and that's what they couldn't pay. So although there was an option, two good teams, by the way, 2 teams that I would consider and actually were World Cup caliber, were in the offing for September. But because of the overall spend and now the way that we need to look at things, it's not just the men's national team, it's not just the women's national team, it's how costs are going to be split and budgets are going to be done the exact same across the board, that one will influence the other. And it's not just spend, that's opportunity as well. So we're living in a different world. This is one of the many reasons that a CBA hasn't been signed. This is another reason why the CBA has to be signed. So maybe situations like this where the men are maybe afforded opportunities like this and maybe, back pocket something for the women in terms of other opportunity that will come onto their plate in the future. But that's what my understanding of why there's no games in September and it looks to be 1 game in October. So I'm not sure if you guys have anything to add or if you heard anything else, but that it's just programmatic spend. That's where we are today. And that's why these decisions couldn't be made. The boss had to check. And by the time he went and checked, then the offer was off the table and other teams had been booked. So that's what I was told or have been told by multiple sources.
That's very good. No, sorry, I'm just reeling a little bit because that was a lot of very good information all at once, and I'm trying to process and digest all of it. Ollie, I saw your wheels turning. Did you want to hop in here?
Look, from my perspective, it's just very disappointing. We've got to figure out a way, and it seems like the bare minimum that we should be able to do, to have our teams fulfill each international window, take the opportunities to hold camps, take the opportunities to play games that are there in the calendar scheduled by FIFA for them. And when we can't do that, it's extremely disappointing. And I don't need us to be playing top 20, top 30 opponents on the men's side every single time. Like the US in September is playing Uzbekistan and Oman. Like, it's playing the big teams is important. You've got to get some of those games in, obviously, to help prepare you for major tournaments. But what's also important is the regularity of the programming for the team, both from an on-field perspective of holding as many camps as possible, but also an off-field perspective of the relevance of the team, right? You don't get that many matches to put in front of a Canadian audience and show why this team should be interesting and should be followed and covered as it is. And so to miss an opportunity to do that, I need more detail really than was provided in that statement to fully understand the decision. But it's extremely disappointing, and felt like maybe an opportunity where even if you can't get the kind of top caliber opponents, come and play some games in Canada. Like, we've played one game in Montreal in like 6 years. I think it was Alphonso Davies' debut was the last time they played in Montreal. They played 2 games in Vancouver, I think, in half a decade. Ottawa, when was the last time the men played there? Like, we've got to start really showcasing this team and creating that regularity of games and attention around it that will help to build the program into something that's more sustainable.
Yeah. Well, a couple things on that. You think that the team, the coaching staff, fans would be happy with Uzbekistan and Oman, with all due respect to them? Like, I know what you're saying, Ollie, but all of those games cost money. And I agree with you. Trust me, as a network who broadcasts national team games, bring on as many as possible. Like, for sponsors, they need more games. Everyone needs more games in order to grow this, build this out. But all this comes at a cost. And I've been around long enough. I've remembered multiple windows where Canada just hasn't played a game. And right now, until a CBA is done and the business side of things is sorted, then I feel like we're still going to be in this weird place of limbo right now. And that's exactly where we are. So all those things that you said are fine, but who's going to pay for these?
But again,
that's where we're at right now.
If we just spin our wheels and don't play any games and don't actually make an attempt to build the program, we'll never be able to pay for this stuff. And for me, we've got to change that mentality of like thinking that, well, what will fans think about us playing Uzbekistan? If the game is in Canada, and again, that's what I'd like to see more of, is games in Canada, and you're coming out to watch. Reasonably priced would be great. You're coming out to watch Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David and Sajan Buchanan in Canada. You're not coming to watch the opponent unless it's one of the top teams in the world, which is fantastic when you can get those games.
And if they come back for a September window, 2 weeks into their season, like some of these players want to play Gold Cup, which is an actual competition. How much travel are you going to be willing to do for a friend? Some guys will, Ollie. Some guys will every time. There's lots of considerations that have to go into this. I think it's much easier. Like, look, at the start of the year, multiple sources told me that they wouldn't even have budget to play any games in any of these fall windows for either program. Like, that's where we were at the start of the year. Like, and I'm not justifying. I'm trying to explain. This isn't the thoughts of Gareth Wheeler. I'm trying to explain this. So they have a game that I'm guessing Japan's flying them over and paying them to go play them in Japan so they can run a camp there. Then they play these Nations League qualifying games of good quality. Then hopefully come next year, the budget then reopens up where there's more wiggle room. Like, do you spend it now or do you spend it next year heading into Copa America? And if you have to make a choice, and right now the business is at a point where they do have to make the choice, I'd rather have those games early next season, building into a potential Copa America rather than some late September window this time around with limited opponents available.
Of course. But I think we still need a proper explanation here as to why we're having to make the choice, because I still don't really know. I know that a lot of money was spent over the past couple of years.
I explained it to you.
But I don't think it's been properly laid out why the federation is in this financial situation it is in right now.
Yeah, there's a lot behind the scenes, and obviously I hate that I have to repeat that COVID happened because I'm doing a really good job forgetting about it.
Of course.
And the Halifax Wanderers fans who were feeding each other beer yesterday was a great reminder that the COVID pandemic has gone by the wayside, which was wonderful. But we do have to park the conversation here because we have more to talk about, and there will be more information as it comes through. But that is the update. Canada will be playing Japan in October.